The morning that changed everything. Tyson Carter awoke to the shrill buzz of his old alarm clock, a sound that had been etched into his daily routine for years. He groggily slapped the side of the clock, but it kept buzzing, relentless, demanding his attention. His small, cluttered room was dim, the only light coming from the slats of the broken blinds. He squinted at the clock, its red digits reading 6:30 a.m. He had no time to waste. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, and the weight of the eviction notice on the kitchen table pulled him back to reality. The notice was creased from too many glances, an ominous reminder that their time was running out. It was a cruel irony. They had barely enough to get by, and now even their home was slipping through their fingers. His mom had already left for her early shift at the diner, as she did every day. She worked double shifts most weeks, never complaining, always moving, always pushing to keep them afloat. Tyson hated it. He hated how hard she worked, how she looked older than her years, how the life she tried to give him felt like it was slipping away despite her efforts. But what could he do? He wasn't old enough to get a full-time job, and his grades didn't even seem to matter. All he had were his books, his escape. He glanced at the table one more time before pulling on his cleanest shirt, one that still had a few holes in the sleeves, but was better than anything else in his wardrobe. He grabbed his backpack and hurried out the door. The morning air was cool, but not enough to erase the gnawing anxiety in his stomach. Tyson lived in a neighborhood where hope was a rare commodity. The buildings sagged with age, paint peeling off like dead skin. Potholes cracked the pavement, and the sound of barking dogs echoed through the fences. Every street corner seemed like it had its own story of neglect, struggle, and resignation. But Tyson didn't mind. This was home. It was just hard sometimes. He walked briskly down the street, passing the rundown apartments and overgrown patches of grass, his sneakers slapping the pavement in a rhythm that matched his racing thoughts. He hated being late. School, though it was the least of his worries, was his refuge, a place where he could forget about bills and eviction notices and pretend like he was just a regular teenager. As he passed through the upscale neighborhood, Tyson couldn't help but glance up at the sleek buildings that touched the sky. The shiny glass of high-rise apartments seemed like another world, one that he didn't belong to. He imagined what it might be like to live in a place like that. No worrying about rent, no evictions, no fights over who would pay the electric bill this month. A black luxury car zoomed past him, its polished exterior gleaming in the morning light. Tyson instinctively took a step back, feeling the weight of his own worn sneakers on the pavement as the car's shadow swallowed him up. The contrast was stark, the clean, orderly world of the rich and the dilapidated streets he called home. Just as he was about to cross the street, something caught his eye. A woman, pregnant, was standing on the sidewalk ahead, her face flushed, her hands clutching her swollen belly. She wavered, as if struggling to keep her balance, and then she stumbled. Tyson's heart raced, his instincts kicked in, and without thinking, he took off towards her. "Hey, are you okay?" he called out, his voice shaky as he reached her side. The woman turned to him, her eyes wide in panic. Her knees buckled, and she began to fall forward, but Tyson was there, just in time to catch her. His hands gripped her arms tightly, steadying her as she swayed dangerously. "Thank you," she gasped, her breath shallow. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Tyson could feel her body trembling in his grasp. "You need help," Tyson said, trying to keep his voice calm, though inside, he was panicking. He looked around, hoping someone would notice and step in. But the busy crowd that passed by just kept moving, each person wrapped up in their own lives, oblivious to the woman in distress. Just stay with me, okay?" Tyson whispered, trying to keep her from collapsing. People began to slow down, some staring, some whispering, but none of them moved closer. Tyson's heart pounded in his chest. Why wasn't anyone helping? Why was it always up to him? Just then, the sound of a security guard's boots echoed across the sidewalk. Tyson looked up and saw him coming, his eyes narrowing as he approached. "What's going on here?" the guard demanded, his hand hovering near his radio. Tyson swallowed hard. He couldn't just let go of the woman. She was already too weak. He had to hold her steady. "I'm helping her," he said, his voice rising in desperation. "She's not okay." The guard didn't seem convinced. His eyes were full of suspicion. He was just about to say something else when a new voice cut through the tension. "Let him through," a deep voice commanded. Tyson looked up in surprise. A man in a sharp suit was walking down the steps of the building behind them. He looked important, his face tight with worry. As he approached, Tyson could see the concern etched on the man's features, and it didn't take long for Tyson to realize who he was. The man knelt beside the woman, his eyes locking onto hers. "Anna, I'm here," he said softly, his voice filled with relief. The woman, still clutching Tyson's arm, looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered again, her grip loosening just slightly. Tyson, his knees aching from kneeling on the hot sidewalk, felt a small wave of relief. At least she was in good hands now. He started to stand, but the man, her husband, turned to him, his eyes locking with Tyson's. "You saved her," he said, his voice full of gratitude. "What's your name, son?" "Tyson," he answered, his voice small. "Tyson," the man repeated, his expression softening. "You've done more for my family than I can put into words. Is there anything I can do for you? Anything at all?" Tyson froze. He wasn't used to people like this. People with power, people who could change things with just a snap of their fingers. Asking him what he wanted. What was he supposed to say? He hesitated, looking at the woman, at the crowd gathering around them, at the man's face full of concern. But for some reason, Tyson couldn't think of a single thing to ask for. Not a thing in the world seemed worth it. The sound of sirens interrupted the moment. The ambulance had arrived, its red and blue lights flashing, its siren blaring. The paramedics rushed out, ready to help, and Tyson stepped back, finally releasing the woman's arm. The paramedics took over, gently guiding her onto a stretcher. Mr. Collins, the woman's husband, stood up and looked at Tyson again, his face serious but filled with something Tyson couldn't quite place. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. "Take this," he said, handing it to Tyson. "Call me, please. I want to help you." Tyson took the card hesitantly, his fingers brushing against the glossy surface. It was a sleek, professional card with the Collins Enterprises logo and the name Mr. J.D. Collins. "Thank you," Tyson mumbled, unsure of what to say. The card felt heavy in his hand. He had no idea why someone like Mr. Collins would want to help him. But it was in his hands now, and it felt like a lifeline, a thread of hope in a world that rarely offered him any. Mr. Collins nodded, giving him a reassuring smile, before turning back to his wife. "I'll be in touch, Tyson," he said, then hurried into the ambulance, his wife's hand gripped tightly in his. Tyson stood there, feeling the weight of the moment settle on him. For the first time in a long time, his future seemed uncertain, but also full of possibility. As the ambulance drove away, sirens fading into the distance, Tyson turned and walked away. The crowd dispersed, but Tyson felt like he was still standing there, staring at the business card in his hand, unsure of what had just happened, but knowing one thing for sure: this was a turning point, and no matter what happened next, he wasn't the same Tyson anymore. He wasn't sure how, but things were about to change, and he would be ready for it. The weight of words. The rest of the day felt like a blur to Tyson. He was barely aware of the lessons, the whispers behind his back, or the glances from classmates who had clearly heard about the incident. Every time he looked up, he saw the face of Mr. Collins in his mind, the man who had saved his wife, the man who now held the key to something Tyson had only dared to dream of. Tyson's head felt like it was spinning. He had tried to focus during history class, But his mind kept drifting back to the business card in his pocket, the weight of it pulling him down with the gravity of its implications. The card was more than just a piece of paper. It was a lifeline, a thread that could potentially unravel all the threads of his life that had been knotted together in hardship. It was the hope he had never dared to believe in. The bell rang at the end of the school day, and Tyson stood up slowly, feeling as though his legs were made of stone. His backpack felt heavier than usual, and the hallway buzzed with the sounds of students talking and laughing as they exited the building. He wanted to be out of there, to get home and think, but his thoughts were already scattered, like leaves in the wind. He walked out of the school, passing through the front gates and heading toward his apartment. He kept his eyes on the ground, avoiding eye contact with the few students still hanging around. He didn't want to engage in small talk or have anyone ask what had happened. Not yet. Not when he was still processing it all. As he reached his building, the familiar sight of peeling paint, cracked sidewalks, and rusted handrails hit him like a punch in the gut. The place wasn't home. Not really. Home was a feeling. A place that he and his mom had once dreamed of, but would never quite reach. It was something beyond these walls, beyond this neighborhood. His mom wasn't home yet, so Tyson had some quiet time to himself. He dropped his backpack by the door and stood there for a moment, staring at the eviction notice that still sat on the kitchen table. The red letters seemed to burn into his soul, a constant reminder of their struggle. His heart clenched at the thought of losing their place, of having nowhere to go, nowhere to call their own. For a brief second, he felt a wave of bitterness. Why had life been so hard on them? Why had his mom worked so much only for it to still not be enough? And why, after everything, was he the one who had to carry all this weight? But the moment passed, and Tyson shook his head, as if trying to shake the negative thoughts loose. He walked over to the small, creaky table where his mom had left a stack of bills. He glanced at them. Nothing good. Just overdue notices, final warnings, and more red ink than he could count. That's when his phone buzzed, startling him. He pulled it out of his pocket and saw that it was a text from an unknown number. He felt a knot form in his stomach, but then he saw the name at the top, J.D. Collins. It was the same man who had handed him the card. Tyson's hands shook as he opened the message. Mr. Collins, hi Tyson, this is J.D. Collins. I'd spoken with someone about your mom's situation. Can you come by my office tomorrow at 10 a.m.? We'll discuss how I can help. I want to make sure you and your mom have a future. Tyson blinked, his eyes going wide. His heart leaped in his chest, and for a moment, he forgot how to breathe. This was real. This was happening. He stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. He couldn't remember the last time someone had shown him this kind of kindness. Even his mom's employers, who she worked so tirelessly for, never went out of their way to help. To them, she was just another server, just another cog in the machine. But Mr. Collins, the man who owned Collins Enterprises, one of the biggest companies in the city, was reaching out to him. Not just because of the incident, but because he genuinely wanted to help. Tyson's mind raced. What did this mean for him? For his mom? He glanced at the time. It was already late afternoon, and his mom would be home soon. He needed to think about this. What could he ask for? What should he ask for? But even more pressing was the question that lingered in the back of his mind. Was he worthy of this kind of help? Tyson had always lived with the belief that people like him, people from neighborhoods like his, were invisible to the world. They were the ones who went unnoticed, the ones who struggled without anyone caring. People like Mr. Collins didn't help people like him. But now, here was this chance, an opportunity to change everything. He clutched the phone tightly, as if holding on to something solid in a world that often felt like it was shifting beneath his feet. His mom came home late that evening, her shoulders slumped, her face tired as she dropped her bag by the door. The familiar scent of the diner lingered on her clothes, and Tyson could see the exhaustion in the lines of her face. "Hey, Mom," he said softly, standing up as she walked in. She gave him a tired smile, and for a moment, He almost couldn't bring himself to tell her about the message. "How was your day?" she asked, her voice weary but warm. Tyson hesitated. "Good. I need to tell you something." His mom stopped in her tracks, her eyes narrowing in concern. "What's wrong, Ty?" He swallowed. I got a message from Mr. Collins today. You know, the guy whose wife I helped yesterday." His mom blinked in confusion. "Wait, Mr. Collins, the billionaire?" "Yeah." Tyson nodded, still feeling the weight of it. He wants to help. He wants me to come to his office tomorrow, and he said he could help you find a job. He wants to make sure we're okay." There was a long pause. His mom stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then her face softened, and her eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and relief. She took a deep breath, her hand gripping the doorframe, as if steadying herself. "Tyson, this is too much. You can't just ask a stranger for help, especially someone like him. You don't know what he wants in return. It could be—" "I didn't ask for anything," Tyson interrupted. "He offered. He said he wanted to help because I saved her. And I didn't even know what to ask for. But maybe this could change things. Maybe we could have a real shot at a future." His mom's face softened. She stepped toward him and put a hand on his shoulder, looking at him like she was trying to figure out if this was a dream. "Tyson," she said slowly, her voice thick with emotion, "this is unbelievable. But you're right. It could change everything. Maybe for the first time, we won't have to struggle so hard." She hesitated before adding, "But we have to be careful, okay? We don't know what kind of strings are attached to this kind of help." Tyson nodded, understanding the caution in her voice. He knew she was just trying to protect him, to keep him from falling into something he couldn't handle. But at the same time, a spark of hope had been lit inside him, one he couldn't extinguish, no matter how hard he tried. "I'll be careful, Mom. But I have to go. I have to see what he can do for us." She sighed, her eyes lingering on him with both pride and fear. "All right, Ty. Just promise me you'll be careful." Tyson gave a small, determined smile. "I will." And for the first time in a long time, Tyson believed in something other than survival. He believed that maybe, just maybe, this time, things would be different. The first step toward hope. The morning light filtered through the small, cracked window of Tyson's apartment, casting a faint glow on the dusty floor. Tyson woke early, well before the alarm could go off, his mind already a whirl of thoughts. The events of the previous day were still fresh in his mind. Mr. Collins's words, the promise to help, the weight of the business card in his pocket. It was all too surreal. He glanced over at the kitchen table, where the eviction notice lay crumpled and discarded, its looming presence now feeling oddly distant, almost irrelevant. The possibility of change had entered his life, and for the first time in ages, Tyson let himself feel the faintest glimmer of hope. He could feel his mother's eyes on him when she walked into the kitchen, the skepticism still hanging over her like a cloud. But today was different. She was quieter, perhaps out of concern, perhaps out of uncertainty. Tyson, too, wasn't sure what was going to happen next. He couldn't predict Mr. Collins's motivations, but he was determined to find out. "Are you sure you want to do this, Tyson?" His mom's voice broke the silence, a mixture of worry and resignation. She was preparing eggs, her movements automatic, but there was something different in the way she asked. "I don't really have a choice, Mom," Tyson replied, leaning against the counter. "This could change everything for us." We cooled. He stopped, shaking his head. "We could get out of here. You won't have to work yourself into the ground anymore." His mom glanced at him briefly, her face softening. She wanted to believe it, but the life they had lived was built on disappointment, and she had learned to protect herself by expecting little. "I just don't want you to get hurt. People like him, they don't help people like us without a reason." Tyson met her gaze, his voice firm. "I won't let anything happen. I'm doing this for us. For you." There was a long pause as his mom looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of doubt and hope. Finally, she sighed and nodded. "All right. But please, Ty, don't forget where we come from." He gave her a small, reassuring smile. "I won't, Mom. I promise." Tyson wasn't sure what kind of promises he was making, but today he was determined to keep them. After a quick breakfast, Tyson made his way to his room to get ready. He pulled on his cleanest shirt, an old hand-me-down from his uncle, and tried to smooth out the wrinkles as best he could. His reflection in the cracked mirror was a young man caught between the world he knew and the world he hoped to enter. When he was ready, he stood by the door, his hand resting on the knob. His heart raced in his chest. Was he ready for this? Could he really walk into the heart of the city's elite and expect to be taken seriously? He swallowed his doubts and stepped outside. The streets were busy as usual, cars honking, people rushing, the noise of the city filling his ears, but it all felt distant, as though Tyson were walking in a dream. He didn't belong here. He never had. But today, he was walking into a place that might change that forever. As he approached the Collins Enterprise building, his nerves began to spike. It was hard to ignore the contrast between the towering glass and steel of the skyscraper and the cracked sidewalks of his neighborhood. The building seemed to reach for the sky, its reflection gleaming in the sunlight like a beacon for those who could afford to enter. Tyson paused at the entrance, his breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he almost turned around. But then, he remembered why he was here. He had a chance to change everything, and he wasn't about to waste it. The door slid open, and Tyson stepped into the lobby. His sneakers squeaked against the polished marble floors as he took in the sleek, minimalist design. The lobby was empty, save for a few assistants typing away at their computers. They didn't look up as Tyson approached the receptionist, a woman in her 30s with sharp features and a professional smile. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but detached. "I'm here to see Mr. Collins," Tyson said, trying to sound confident. "Tyson Carter. I have an appointment." The receptionist looked at him for a moment, her gaze flicking down to the clipboard in front of her. She hesitated, and for a split second, Tyson thought she was going to dismiss him, but then she nodded. "Mr. Collins is expecting you. Please, have a seat." She gestured to a set of plush chairs in the corner, and Tyson did as instructed, sitting down and trying to calm his racing thoughts. His hands were clammy, his stomach a knot of tension. He wasn't sure what was about to happen, but he knew it was the beginning of something big. Time seemed to drag as he waited. He watched as the assistants and employees bustled around, each of them moving with purpose. They were all dressed in suits and carrying expensive-looking briefcases, their lives so far removed from his own that it made his stomach turn. He had to remind himself why he was here. He wasn't like them. He never would be. But maybe, just maybe, there was a way to change that. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and a tall man in a well-tailored suit stepped out. He had salt and pepper hair, a confident stride, and eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. Tyson recognized him immediately. It was Mr. Collins. "Tyson Carter," Mr. Collins said, his voice warm but firm. "It's good to finally meet you in person." He extended his hand, and Tyson shook it, feeling the firm grip of a man who was used to being in control. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Collins," Tyson said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Call me JD," Mr. Collins replied, leading him toward his office. "Please, have a seat." Tyson followed him into the office, a large open space with floor-to-ceiling windows that gave a breathtaking view of the city. The walls were adorned with modern art, and a large desk sat in the center of the room. "I'm sure this all feels a bit overwhelming for you," JD said, sitting down behind the desk. He gestured for Tyson to take a seat in the chair across from him. "But I want to assure you, Tyson, that I'm here to help. You saved my wife, and because of that, I owe you." Tyson sat down, his mind still racing. I just did what anyone would have done. JD smiled. No, not everyone would have done that. Not in your position. You took a risk, and because of you, my wife is alive. For that, I'm grateful. Tyson swallowed, trying to keep his emotions in check. The weight of the situation was pressing on him, and he struggled to find the words. I don't really know what to say. I never expected something like this to happen. Well, JD said, his tone shifting slightly. Now that it's happened, we need to figure out how we can make it count. I want to help you, Tyson. I want to make sure you and your mom have the opportunity to build a better life. Tyson nodded, but the words felt like they were stuck in his throat. He had never been in a position like this before, and now that it was happening, it was both exciting and terrifying. What should he ask for? What was he even entitled to? JD leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. I've spoken to a few people about your situation. I can help your mom get a job at one of our other facilities. I can also provide financial assistance, so you don't have to worry about rent for a while. You don't have to pay me back. This is simply my way of thanking you. Tyson's breath caught in his throat. He had never imagined something like this. His mom, no longer struggling to survive, no longer buried under the weight of constant worry. He felt his eyes sting, but he blinked the tears away before they could fall. Thank you, Tyson whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He hadn't known he needed this kind of help until he was hearing it offered. But now that it was in front of him, he realized how badly he needed it. JD smiled, clearly pleased with Tyson's reaction. It's the least I can do. I'm in a position to help, and I want to make sure you have every opportunity to succeed. I'll be in touch soon, Tyson. We'll make this work. Tyson stood up, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. He had come here hoping for a chance, but what he had gotten was beyond anything he could have imagined. For the first time in his life, he believed that maybe, just maybe, everything was about to change. And as he walked out of that office, the heavy door closing softly behind him, Tyson felt like he was walking on air. The world had just opened up to him in a way he had never thought possible. He had taken the first step toward a new life. The tipping point. Tyson couldn't remember the last time he had felt so light. As he stepped out of Collins Enterprise, the cool breeze hit his face, carrying with it the distant hum of the city's heartbeat. It felt almost surreal. The way the world around him hadn't changed, yet his life had already been altered irrevocably. He had gone into that building unsure of what would happen. Now he walked out with an opportunity he could never have imagined just a few days ago. The streets seemed brighter, somehow, though they hadn't changed. The usual bustling traffic, the tired faces of passers-by, even the rusted street signs, they were all still there. But for Tyson, they now felt like the background noise of something greater. He dug into his pocket, fingers brushing against the card Mr. Collins had given him. Call me anytime. Let me help. The words echoed in his mind as he stared at the card, feeling its weight. It wasn't just a business card anymore. It was a symbol of the possibility he had been craving. But as much as he tried to hold on to the hope, a part of him, deep inside, still hesitated. Could he really do this? Was he ready for the kind of life that was being offered to him? It was overwhelming, but it was also a lifeline that was ready to be pulled taut if he just reached out and grabbed it. Tyson's phone buzzed in his pocket, jerking him from his thoughts. His heart skipped a beat as he pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was a text from his mom. Tyson, did you meet with Mr. Collins? How did it go? Are you okay? He smiled a little at the concern in her message, but a lump formed in his throat. For years, she had worked herself to the bone, trying to make ends meet, never letting on how hard it was. And now, after everything they had been through, Tyson finally had a way to change all of that. But it wasn't just for him, it was for her too. It went well, Mom. I think things are finally going to change for us. He sent the text and slipped his phone back into his pocket, taking a deep breath as he made his way back home. It wasn't far, just a few blocks, but every step felt like a giant leap. When he reached the apartment, he paused before walking inside, trying to collect himself. He didn't want to appear too excited. He knew his mom would want to hear about every detail, but he also knew her first instinct would be to worry. She always worried, and Tyson understood why. People like them didn't get chances like this. They worked twice as hard, only to be knocked down again and again. But this time, things were different. This time, Tyson wasn't just asking for a handout. He was fighting for a future. He stepped inside, finding his mom sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in front of her. Her tired eyes met his, and for a moment, Tyson saw the exhaustion that never quite left her. "Well," she asked, her voice soft. "What happened? What did Mr. Collins say?" Tyson sat down across from her, his heart pounding in his chest. "He said he wants to help, Mom. He's going to get you a job, something stable, not just a diner or a temp job, something that pays well. And he said he'll help with the rent, so we don't have to worry about getting kicked out." His mom blinked, a look of disbelief crossing her face. "Wait, what? You're sure?" Tyson nodded, leaning forward. "I'm sure. He said he owes me for what I did for Anna, and he wants to make sure we're taken care of." She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to gauge whether he was telling the truth. Then her shoulders sagged, and the weariness in her eyes deepened. "I don't know, Tyson. People like him, they don't just do things for free. There's always a catch. Always." "I don't think so, Mom. He's not asking for anything. He just wants to help." She shook her head slowly. "Tyson, it sounds too good to be true. I don't want you getting your hopes up just for someone to turn around and disappoint you." Tyson felt a surge of frustration. His mom had every right to be skeptical, but he couldn't let her dismiss this chance. Not now, not when everything was so close. "I'm not asking you to trust him. I'm asking you to trust me. I know this is real. He's not like the others." His mom fell silent for a long moment, her eyes downcast. Then, with a sigh, she looked back at him. "All right. I'll trust you, but please don't get your heart broken, Ty. I've seen this happen before." Tyson smiled at her, though his heart was heavy. "I won't, Mom. I promise." But as he sat there with her, he felt that same knot of uncertainty tightening in his chest. What if his mom was right? What if Mr. Collins's offer wasn't as selfless as it seemed? People didn't just help others without expecting something in return. That was a lesson Tyson had learned the hard way. And yet, there was something different about J.D. Collins. Tyson couldn't put his finger on it, but the man's sincerity had felt genuine. And for once, Tyson allowed himself to believe in that. The next few days passed in a blur. Tyson went to school, but his mind was never fully there. He couldn't concentrate on his homework, couldn't focus on the lessons. All he could think about was the future. Mr. Collins had said they would talk soon, hadn't he? He had promised Tyson he'd arrange something for his mom. Tyson just had to hold on a little longer. Then, on Thursday afternoon, as Tyson was heading home, his phone buzzed again. It was a call from an unknown number. His stomach flipped as he answered. "Hello, Tyson? It's J.D. Collins. I'm sorry to call you so suddenly, but I've got some good news. We found something for your mom. A position at one of our partners' facilities. It's a good job, and it'll pay well. I need her to come in tomorrow for an interview." Tyson's heart leaped in his chest. He could hardly believe it. "Really? She gets an interview?" "Absolutely. I'll take care of the details. All you need to do is get her to the location tomorrow at 10 a.m. Can you do that?" "Of course. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Thank you so much. I'll see you both tomorrow, Tyson. You've done a good thing. I'll make sure this works out." As the call ended, Tyson could hardly contain his excitement. His mom was finally going to have a real chance. The job would be more than just a paycheck. It was her ticket out of the endless cycle of exhaustion and worry. It was the start of something new. Tyson's legs were shaking as he walked back inside, barely able to contain the grin spreading across his face. "Mom," he called, rushing into the kitchen. She was still sitting at the table, but when she saw the expression on his face, her eyes widened in surprise. "What's going on, Tyson?" He could hardly get the words out fast enough. "He did it, Mom. Mr. Collins set up an interview for you. It's tomorrow at 10 a.m. It's with one of his partners, and it's a great job. He said he'll take care of everything." Her hands froze, a trembling cup of tea in her grip. "Are you sure? Is this for real?" Tyson nodded, his smile growing. "I'm sure. We're not going to have to worry anymore, Mom. Things are finally changing." She stared at him for a long moment, her face unreadable, and then she set the cup down carefully, as if afraid it might slip from her fingers. I can't believe it." "You don't have to believe it yet. Just get ready. Tomorrow's going to be the start of something different." The rest of the evening passed in a haze of preparation. Tyson helped his mom pick out something nice to wear to the interview, though she insisted it wasn't necessary. The entire time, his mind was racing, but he couldn't stop smiling. Tomorrow everything would change. When he finally went to bed that night, it was with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to drift off to sleep without the constant gnawing fear that things would never get better. Tomorrow, they would take the first step toward a new life, and Tyson couldn't wait to see where it would lead. The leap of faith. The morning light poured through the small window of their apartment, casting long shadows across the cramped living room. Tyson lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind already racing ahead to the day's big moment. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear, but from the overwhelming sense of possibility that had taken hold of him. Today wasn't just another day. Today could be the beginning of something incredible. He glanced over at his mom, still asleep on the couch, her face soft and peaceful despite the weight of their struggles. Tyson could see the weariness that still clung to her, even in sleep. For years, she had worked tirelessly to keep a roof over their heads, sacrificing her own happiness to make sure he had food to eat and clothes to wear. And now, for the first time, there was hope. A real chance. Tyson didn't know how Mr. Collins had managed to pull strings so quickly, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was that his mom had the opportunity to finally breathe. Tyson slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, and went to the kitchen. The familiar smell of coffee filled the air as he made breakfast, his hands moving mechanically as his mind ran over everything that had happened. He was nervous. He couldn't help it. The reality of what they were about to do hadn't fully sunk in yet, but he had to believe that this was real. They had worked too hard, fought too many battles, for it to all fall apart now. A knock at the door jolted him out of his thoughts, making him nearly drop the mug he was holding. He turned, heart skipping a beat, and went to answer it. When he opened the door, there stood a sleek black car idling on the street just outside their building. The driver, a well-dressed man in a dark suit, smiled politely. "Good morning, Tyson," he said. "Mr. Collins sent me to take you and your mother to the interview." Tyson blinked, stunned for a moment. He had expected maybe a ride on the bus or a cab, not a car that looked like it belonged in a high-end dealership. His stomach fluttered nervously as he stepped back, allowing the driver to enter. "Is my mom ready?" Tyson asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's expecting you, sir," the driver said, his tone respectful. "Shall I help her with her things?" Tyson nodded, his hands trembling slightly. He turned and walked back to the living room, where his mom was already sitting up, rubbing her eyes. She looked up in surprise as Tyson approached, a puzzled look crossing her face. "Tyson, what's going on?" she asked, her voice still groggy from sleep. "That's the car," Tyson said, pointing out the window toward the sleek vehicle. "Mr. Collins arranged it. We're supposed to go to the interview now." His mom blinked, her expression slowly transforming from confusion to disbelief. That car? You mean, we're really doing this? Tyson smiled, feeling a rush of excitement. Yes, Mom. We're really doing this. Let's go. She hesitated for a moment, still not entirely sure if this was some dream she might wake up from any second. But then, seeing the genuine excitement in Tyson's eyes, she slowly nodded and stood up. For the first time in what felt like forever, she looked hopeful. They stepped outside, the driver waiting patiently as they approached the car. The moment Tyson opened the door for his mom, a sense of grandeur washed over him. It wasn't just the car. It was the realization that they were about to step into a new world, a world where things might actually get better. As the car sped through the city streets, Tyson's thoughts raced. What would the interview be like? Was his mom prepared? What if she messed up? What if, after everything, they were turned away? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he shoved it down. Today, they had to believe. The drive seemed to take forever. As they neared their destination, Tyson glanced out the window at the gleaming buildings of downtown, his thoughts drifting. He couldn't help but wonder what it would feel like to belong in a place like this, to live in a world where opportunities came easily, where your future was yours to shape, not handed to you in scraps. The Collins Enterprise building loomed ahead, towering over everything else, its glass facade gleaming in the morning sunlight. The car came to a smooth stop in front of the building, and the driver got out to open the door for them. Tyson helped his mom out, both of them stepping into the imposing lobby. The atmosphere inside was almost sterile, with polished floors, sleek furniture, and hushed voices echoing off the walls. Tyson could feel his nervousness intensifying. This was it. This was the moment that could change everything. "Mr. Collins is expecting you," the receptionist said, her tone professional yet warm. "Please follow me." They walked down a long hallway, and the closer they got to the office, the more Tyson's heart hammered in his chest. He glanced over at his mom, who looked just as nervous as he felt. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she kept her chin up, trying to appear calm. When they reached the door, the receptionist knocked softly, then entered without waiting for a response. "Mr. Collins, they're here." "Good," a deep, reassuring voice replied from inside. Tyson's heart skipped. He had only spoken with Mr. Collins a few times, but his voice had an authority, a calmness, that Tyson could feel even through the phone. The receptionist stepped aside, and Tyson followed his mom into the office. Mr. Collins rose from behind his desk as they entered, offering them both a firm handshake. He was dressed impeccably in a suit, his demeanor warm yet professional. Behind him, large windows offered a panoramic view of the city. "Please come in, have a seat," Mr. Collins said, gesturing to the chairs in front of his desk. "Tyson, I'm glad to see you again. And Mrs. Carter, I trust you've had a pleasant morning so far." Tyson's mom hesitated, then nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Collins. We're still trying to get used to all of this." "I understand," Mr. Collins said with a soft smile. "Please, don't feel any pressure. Today is simply about getting to know each other and making sure that this opportunity is right for you." They sat down, and for the next several minutes, Mr. Collins guided them through the interview process. It wasn't like anything Tyson had expected. There were no hard questions, no cold evaluations. Instead, Mr. Collins asked about his mom's past experience, her interests, and her skills, carefully listening to each answer. He made her feel like she mattered, like her hard work and perseverance were not just something to be tolerated, but something to be valued. As the interview came to a close, Mr. Collins leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful look on his face. "I think we're going to be able to offer you something, Mrs. Carter. I'll have the details worked out by the end of the day. You've done well." Tyson's mom blinked in surprise. "Really? You're offering me the job?" Mr. Collins smiled, and for a moment, Tyson could see a flicker of genuine kindness in his eyes. "Yes, Mrs. Carter. I believe you're exactly what we've been looking for. I'll have someone from HR contact you with the official offer and the next steps." Tears welled up in his mom's eyes, and she blinked rapidly to keep them from falling. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Mr. Collins said softly. "I'm just happy I could help." The weight of the moment was overwhelming. Tyson felt his heart swell in his chest. He had never seen his mom this relieved, this hopeful. It wasn't just the job. It was everything that had been building up to this point. The long nights, the struggle, the uncertainty. And now, for the first time in years, they had a real shot at something better. As they left the building, Tyson felt like he was walking on air. The city, which had once seemed so cold and distant, now felt like a place of possibility. His mom had the job offer in her hands, and Tyson couldn't wait to see where this new path would lead them. But there was still one thing left to do. One last conversation he had to have. And for that, he needed to pick up the phone again. The power of giving back. Tyson didn't sleep that night. The adrenaline from the day had kept him awake, his mind swirling with thoughts of the future. His mom had cried herself to sleep, finally feeling the relief that had eluded her for so long. Tyson couldn't help but smile at the thought. He had always tried to protect her, to shield her from the stress of their situation. But today, it was her turn to feel the weight of hope and possibility. As the morning sun crept through the blinds, Tyson stared at the ceiling, barely aware of the hours slipping by. The interview had gone better than he could have ever imagined. His mom was going to start work at Collins Enterprise. Finally, a chance for her to leave behind the hard, thankless shifts at the diner. But even as he celebrated, one thought gnawed at him. What now? He wasn't just going to let things happen without taking control. There had to be more to this than just a job. The phone call he had been dreading was coming, the one he wasn't sure he was ready for. He had been avoiding Mr. Collins's business card ever since the interview, not out of disrespect, but because of the weight it carried. Tyson had asked for help before, but this time was different. He wasn't asking for money or a handout. He was asking for a new life, a chance to change everything for his mom, for both of them. The thought of calling Mr. Collins made his palms sweat, but Tyson knew that this was the moment. His mom had finally found a job, but Tyson hadn't forgotten what Mr. Collins had promised him in return for saving his wife. That promise wasn't just words. It was an offer to change their lives, and Tyson wasn't about to back down now. After a long, deep breath, Tyson grabbed the business card from his desk drawer. His fingers hovered over the numbers as he dialed the number, each ring filling him with more anticipation. When Mr. Collins picked up, Tyson's heart jumped in his chest. "Mr. Collins." Tyson's voice was steady, but inside, he felt like his whole body was vibrating. "Yes, Tyson," Mr. Collins replied, his tone warm and familiar. "How are you? How's your mother? Has she heard the news yet?" "She's doing great," Tyson replied, feeling a slight relief flood over him. "She got the job offer. She's really happy, Mr. Collins. Thank you so much. I didn't think it would happen this fast." "I'm glad to hear that," Mr. Collins said. "But that's not why you're calling, is it?" Tyson swallowed, the truth finally breaking through his nerves. He had to say it, had to ask for what he had been thinking about for days. "No, it's not," Tyson said, his voice more firm than he had expected. "You promised me that you would help me with anything I needed. And I think I know what I need now." "Go on," Mr. Collins urged, his voice patient, understanding. Tyson hesitated, trying to choose his words carefully. He had been thinking about this moment for days, had been running it through his head over and over again. He knew he had only one chance to get it right. "Mr. Collins, I want to help people the way you've helped me," Tyson said, his voice catching a little. "I want to do something that matters, something that can change the world the way you've changed mine. But I don't know where to start. I don't have the resources, and I don't have the experience. I just know that. I don't want to waste this chance." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. And for a moment, Tyson's heart sank. Had he asked too much? Had he overstepped by wanting to do more than just take what was being offered to him? Then Mr. Collins spoke, and his words hit Tyson like a thunderclap. "You're asking for something bigger than most people would," Mr. Collins said, his voice unwavering. "But I think I understand what you're saying, Tyson. You want to make a difference. You want to take what's been given to you and pay it forward." Tyson nodded, even though he knew Mr. Collins couldn't see him. "Yes, sir. I want to help others the way you've helped us. You've shown me that there are people who care, that not everything is about money or status. I want to make sure no one has to struggle the way we did." A low chuckle came from Mr. Collins's end. "Tyson, I've worked with people from all walks of life, and I can tell you that you've got something special. Not everyone would ask for that kind of responsibility, but I believe in you. Let me help you get there." Tyson's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You mean it?" "I do," Mr. Collins said, his voice steady and serious now. "I'll make sure you have the opportunity to develop those skills. You'll need to start small, work hard, and learn from people who have done it before. But Tyson, I'll help you get there. You're not alone in this." Tears welled up in Tyson's eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't feel alone. It was like all the hard years, all the struggle, had finally been leading up to this moment. Tyson could feel the power of possibility flowing through him, and he knew that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't even imagine. "Thank you," Tyson whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "Thank you so much. You've already done more than most," Mr. Collins replied. "Now it's time to take that next step. We'll make sure you're ready." Tyson hung up the phone with a sense of peace he had never known. He wasn't just receiving help anymore. He was being given the tools to help others, to make a difference in the world the same way Mr. Collins had done for him. He sat there for a moment, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. And as the tears slowly spilled down his face, he smiled, knowing that he had taken the first step toward something much bigger than himself. That afternoon, Tyson sat with his mom at their tiny kitchen table, both of them barely able to believe how much had changed in the last few days. Tyson's mom had a new job, and Tyson now had a mentor, a man who saw potential in him and was willing to invest in his future. Tyson could see it in his mom's eyes. She was proud of him. For all the years she had worked herself to the bone, it was Tyson who had finally given them a chance at something better. And now it was time to take that chance and run with it. "What did Mr. Collins say?" his mom asked, her voice filled with curiosity. Tyson took a deep breath, a wide smile spreading across his face. "He's going to help me," he said, "not just with getting a job, but with building something bigger. He's giving me the chance to help people the way he's helped us. He believes in me, Mom." Tears welled in his mom's eyes once again, but this time, they were tears of pride and gratitude. "Tyson, I don't know what to say. You've always been special. I just never knew how much." "We're going to be okay," Tyson said, his voice steady and full of conviction. "We're going to make a difference, Mom, together." And in that moment, as the weight of the future lifted from their shoulders, they both knew that the world was wide open to them. No longer bound by their past, they were free to build a future full of possibilities, filled with the promise of a better tomorrow. In the weeks that followed, Tyson took everything Mr. Collins had offered him to heart. He spent every free moment learning about the world of business, mentoring others in the community, and applying the lessons he had learned from his experiences. Each small step felt like a victory, a reminder of how far he had come from that scared teenager standing on the sidewalk, offering a hand to someone in need. And in the end, that was the greatest gift Mr. Collins had given him, the chance to change his life by first changing the lives of others. It was a chance Tyson would never take for granted. As the days turned into weeks, Tyson's life slowly started to shift. He no longer woke up to the same crushing weight of uncertainty that had burdened him for years. He no longer heard his mom's tired sighs after long shifts at the diner, nor did he see the worry etched into her face as she wondered how they would make it through another month. Instead, he watched her walk into their small apartment each evening with a brighter look in her eyes, a sign that things were finally beginning to change. Tyson had kept his promise to Mr. Collins. He had thrown himself into learning everything he could. He studied the basics of business, read books about leadership, and spent countless hours shadowing mentors and colleagues from the Collins Enterprise team. He wasn't just learning how to build a future for himself. He was learning how to help others, how to give back to his community. Tyson had always known the world wasn't fair, but now he was determined to make it a little more just, even if it was just in his small corner of it. His mom, too, was adjusting to her new role. She'd started as an assistant to the team working on community outreach programs at Collins Enterprise, a role that was much more than just a job for her. It was a purpose, a reason to wake up every morning with hope, knowing that her hard work would not go unnoticed. Her confidence grew, and with it, so did her smile. The long hours at the diner felt like a distant memory now. But for Tyson, the biggest change wasn't just his mom's new job or the financial stability they had begun to experience. It was the way he saw the world, through a new lens of possibility. The opportunities that once seemed impossible now felt within reach. One afternoon, after a long day of work at a local community center that Tyson had been volunteering at, he found himself sitting with his mom in their kitchen again. She was making dinner as usual, the smell of her home-cooked meal filling the air. But there was something different this time. There was a sense of peace in the room, a calm that they hadn't experienced in years. Tyson had been thinking a lot about what Mr. Collins had said to him. "You're not alone in this." He hadn't fully understood the weight of those words until now. But what Mr. Collins had done, taking a chance on him, believing in his potential, had set off a chain reaction that was more powerful than Tyson could have imagined. It wasn't just about him. It was about everyone he could now help, starting with his own community. "Mom," Tyson said, breaking the silence as she placed a plate of food in front of him. "I've been thinking a lot. I've learned so much from Mr. Collins, and I think it's time for me to do something bigger. It's time to give back." His mom looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. She set down her fork and met his gaze, her eyes filled with both pride and caution. "What do you mean, Tyson?" Tyson leaned forward, his fingers nervously tapping the table. "I've been talking to some people at the community center. They're looking for someone to help organize a program for at-risk youth, kids who don't have the same opportunities we did. I want to be the one to help them, to show them that they can do more, that there's more out there for them if they work for it. I've been where they are, Mom. I know what it's like to feel like there's no way out. But if I can do it, so can they." His mom's face softened, her lips curling into a gentle smile. She reached across the table and placed her hand on top of his. "Tyson, I'm so proud of you. You've always had a big heart, and I know that whatever you set your mind to, you'll make it happen." Tyson felt a rush of gratitude fill his chest. His mom had always been his rock, the one person who believed in him no matter what. Now, for the first time in a long time, Tyson felt that he could truly give something back to her, to the people in their community who had always struggled the way they had. The next day, Tyson called Mr. Collins again. The conversation was brief but impactful. Tyson explained his idea: a youth mentorship program to help at-risk kids gain skills, confidence, and opportunities for success. Mr. Collins, as usual, was supportive. He immediately promised to help fund the program and provided contacts within the company to help Tyson get started. It was an overwhelming sense of responsibility, but Tyson was ready. Weeks later, the youth mentorship program officially launched. Tyson had worked tirelessly with local leaders, organizations, and volunteers to create a curriculum that would teach kids not only practical skills, but also the importance of community and giving back. The program was designed to show these kids that, despite the challenges they faced, they had the power to change their own lives. The first day of the program, Tyson stood at the front of a crowded community center, facing a room full of kids who, like him, had grown up with little to no opportunities. Many of them were skeptical, unsure of whether they should invest their time in something that seemed like just another program that would fail them. But Tyson was determined. He spoke from the heart, sharing his story, the struggles, the doubts, and the turning point when he had been offered a chance to make a real difference in his own life. He told them that no matter their circumstances, they had the ability to choose their future. "I know what it's like to feel like no one sees you," Tyson said, his voice strong but filled with empathy. "But you're not invisible. You matter. And we're going to work together to make sure you know that. You have everything you need inside of you to make it, but sometimes you just need a little help. I'm here to help you, just like someone helped me." As he spoke, Tyson could see the change in their faces. Slowly, the skeptical expressions began to soften. The kids were listening. They were finally starting to believe. And that's when Tyson realized the power of his journey. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the people he could help along the way. Each success, each breakthrough, was a small victory that built on the next. Tyson wasn't just changing his own life. He was changing the lives of others, one step at a time. The program grew rapidly. More kids signed up, eager to learn and grow. Tyson brought in guest speakers, local entrepreneurs, and successful individuals who could inspire these kids to dream bigger. With every lesson, every success, the program became a lifeline for those who needed it most. Months passed, and Tyson found himself at the heart of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. What had started as a simple request for help had evolved into a movement. He built a network of mentors and volunteers who were all committed to changing the lives of these kids. They weren't just learning skills. They were learning to believe in themselves. Through all of this, Tyson kept in touch with Mr. Collins, who remained a mentor and friend. The two of them met regularly to discuss the progress of the program and brainstorm ways to expand it. Mr. Collins was more than just a benefactor. He was a partner in this mission to change the world. "Tyson," Mr. Collins said one afternoon as they sat in his office, reviewing the program's impact, "you've done something incredible here. But don't forget, you didn't do it alone. You've had help along the way. The people you're helping, they're going to remember this. They're going to carry the torch for the next generation." Tyson nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "I just hope I'm doing enough," he said quietly. "You are," Mr. Collins assured him, a smile crossing his face. "You've created something that will outlast you. That's the kind of impact that matters." As Tyson left Mr. Collins's office that day, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had started this journey to change his own life, but somewhere along the way, he had realized that true happiness came not from what he could get, but from what he could give. The mentorship program was just the beginning. He knew now that he was capable of much more. And as he looked back on everything he had accomplished, Tyson realized that the most important lesson he had learned was this: when you help others, you end up helping yourself more than you ever could have imagined. It wasn't just about what he had received from Mr. Collins. It was about what he was able to give back in return. And that, he knew, was the true power of change.